Hi there guys, this is Chris Coney speaking and welcome back to the Cryptoverse. So I had this idea for this episode called How to Prepare for the Hex Launch, and I'm going to deliver it to you today. It occurred to me when I was talking to Richard Hart the other day on the live stream. We had a 3-hour interview, and there's a couple of things that he said when I asked him questions that inspired me to share this with you, because there is a preparatory step you can take now, even though Hex isn't launched yet and the snapshot isn't even announced. But I think this is going to be valuable. So given that I store most of my Bitcoin holdings on a Ledger Nano S, that's the version I'm going to give you here, but these principles apply universally, so follow me with this one. So if you're asking the question, what on earth is Hex? If you're not up to speed on Hex, please watch my previous videos on it or visit the official website. It's now just called Hex, but if you go to bitcoinhex.com, you can read all about it officially. All right. This episode is not going to talk about what Hex is. It's designed to move the conversation forward. So go to my previously recorded videos for what is Hex. So let's move on here to the next slide, and I've got a couple of diagrams for you, as I always do. So this is what occurred to me. Hex requires a claim for each Bitcoin address. What I've got on screen here is two questions from the Bitcoin Hex or Hex FAQ, frequently asked questions. So one of the questions is, which address do I claim from? And the answer is any Bitcoin address you have a balance on that you wish to claim Bitcoin Hex for. Because the way Bitcoin Hex works is you get a number of Hex based on the balance of Bitcoin that you have on the snapshot date, which hasn't been announced yet. And the other question in the FAQ is, do I have to claim for each Bitcoin address separately? And it says yes. So that's where I think we need to do some preparation, depending on your level of technical competency and how much complexity you are comfortable with. So let's move on here. So what does this mean, this Bitcoin Hex FAQ question? I'm going to keep calling it Bitcoin Hex because that's just a bad habit. I'm sorry. So depending on how active your wallet is, it will look something like this right now. So on the far left, we have my BTC private key, which is stored safely in my Ledger Nano S hardware wallet. We then have our public address, which let's say right now I have 0.1782 BTC in my ledger. Now I've put there BTC X public address because we actually only have one public address. It's called the extended public address, but most people don't know that because it's not relevant. And what we do with that is we hash it into 2 billion receiving addresses. That's how come we can generate a new Bitcoin receiving address every time. So you never normally see your extended public address, but I've drawn it like that because this is technically how it works. So if I have, say, 5 receiving addresses and my total balance in my ledger is 0.1782 BTC, it might be split up into 5 receiving addresses, according to the balances you see on the right-hand side there. That's just for argument's sake, but you could have 20 or 30 receiving addresses. Your Bitcoin could be spread across 20 or 30 different addresses, and that'll mean that you'd have to claim your Hex for each address. And this is the way I understand it right now. So this is actually the previous diagram. I couldn't fit it on the slide, but if you imagine if we then move to the right, all those receiving addresses with the balances, they're now on the left-hand side of this diagram. So according to the Hex FAQ, we have to claim for each address, which means, each of the blue claims here, there's 5 claims to be had because I'm claiming for 5 different Bitcoin addresses. So the first one there, the first address has 0.003 BTC in it. That means I would have 30 Hex for that because you get 10,000 Hex for every 1 Bitcoin you have in the address. So then it goes down from there. Second claim, I claim 600 Hex, then 1,000, for each address, right? And I would claim that to my, I've called it ETH receiving address because Hex is an ERC20 token based on the Ethereum blockchain. So I'm going to be claiming to an Ethereum address, which is what's happening on the far right there. Now in this example, I'm claiming all of my Bitcoin receiving addresses and I'm claiming all of my Hex to the same Ethereum address, right? That's in the FAQ as well. It says, can I claim all of my addresses to a single Ethereum address? And the answer is yes. And that's what I've depicted right here. Moving on, here's a simpler approach. Now this is much simpler, reduces complexity, but it comes at the cost of privacy because we're going to link all of our previously unlinked receiving addresses together. So this is to prepare for the snapshot, which is the preparatory step you can take is by collecting all of your Bitcoin across all of the various receiving addresses that it's scattered about, and basically sending it to yourself, but sending it all to the same receiving address. The purpose behind that, this is what it will look like, right? Once we've collected all of our Bitcoin into a single receiving address, well, when all of our Bitcoin is in the same address, we only then have to make one claim. So it would be like one Bitcoin receiving address, all of it's in there. We make one claim of hex for that balance to our Ethereum address, and that's it. But I've said at the bottom here, this approach offers the worst privacy, because back to the previous slide, previously, all of these 5 Bitcoin receiving addresses could have looked separate, and there's no link between them. By sending all the Bitcoin ourselves, kind of between those addresses, and that's, it's the cost of privacy. And Richard Hart did mention that. So while this is simpler, it makes claiming simpler. Just be aware it does come at the cost of privacy. It compromises your privacy a bit, but it does make it super simple, so that when the snapshot happens, it's one Bitcoin address of yours that gets snapshotted, and then you just make one claim for your hex, and that's it. It's the simplest process, but at the cost of the worst privacy. If you want the best privacy, then you need to be more technically competent, and you also need to be comfortable handling a bit more complexity, because this is the ultimate, which is where we make a separate claim for each Bitcoin address, but we claim it to a different Ethereum address. So back here, I was taking all of my Bitcoin, sending it to myself, and then claiming to one Ethereum address. Or even in a previous example, I was claiming all the different addresses to what, that's the one, claiming my 5 Bitcoin addresses to one Ethereum address. Or the ultimate would be taking each one of my Bitcoin addresses and making a single claim to a different Ethereum address. So Bitcoin balance number 1, I claim to Ethereum address number 1. Bitcoin address number 2, I claim it to a different Ethereum address, and on we go. So this would be one claim per Bitcoin address, but I would have to use a different Ethereum address for each claim. So that's why I say this is more technically complex, and if you're not comfortable with it, you might want to, pay the price of privacy and go with the one on the previous slide. But the reason this is the best privacy is, like I've put at the bottom here, to the networks, to the public blockchain on Ethereum and the public blockchain on Bitcoin. Each of these rows that you see on the diagram, they would appear to the public to be 5 different people making 5 different claims. You couldn't tell if it was one person making the 5 claims or whether it was, the same person making the 5 claims. All we know from the public blockchain would be this Bitcoin receiving address and this Ethereum address, and each one is separated because you're bothering to make each claim to a different Ethereum address, right? So that's really the ultimate claim process if you're comfortable with the complexity and want the best privacy. But there we go. You might want to rewind that and look at it again. But if you're asking the question now, how exactly do you claim hex? At the time of recording this video, the hex claim tool hasn't even been released yet. The snapshot date for snapshotting Bitcoin balances also hasn't been announced yet. Once it has, though, I intend to make and release a dedicated tutorial on exactly how to claim your hex. But for the time being, all you have to do is have some Bitcoin balance in an address, and if you want to prepare in the way that I've just suggested, go ahead and do that. But that is pretty much all I've got for you today. If I get over to the next slide here, please like, subscribe, and share this video. I'd very much appreciate that. If you want to reward me, then you can use my Bitcoin Hex referral link in the description. That'll get me some bonuses when it goes live. Or sign up as a patron if you want to earn yourself cryptocurrency rewards for being a member of my audience. If you're the kind of person that likes to accumulate cryptocurrency, that's right up your street. But that's all I've got for you today. I'll be back with the next episode of the Cryptoverse. So until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.